Um, Good morning, everyone. My name is John Bennett, and I'm with the University of Minnesota Extension Center for Community Vitality, and hope everyone is doing well. And this morning here, we have our third webinar in our retaining businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm here with my colleague, Michael Darger. Michael is also with Extension, and is a specialist, does work with business retention and expansion. And he and I manage that program together. We've been putting on webinars here for a couple of years now, and recently we decided to start this series about how to retain businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're glad you're here. This morning we're going to be talking about retail and business districts, and with us we have my colleague in West Central Minnesota, Ryan Pesch. Ryan is an educator and is also the manager of our retail programs. And we have Emily Kurash Casey. Emily is with Rethos, and she's going to talk to us about some of the programs that she's working on and some of the work that she's doing. The webinar should last about half an hour here with some discussion and an opportunity at the end for questions. So with that, Ryan, I think I'm gonna kick it over to you, and if you have take it away.
Great, yeah, great, John. Yeah, so it's kind of two main parts of this, three main parts of this webinar. I'm just going to give a few introductory remarks regarding some data and what we know about retail in Minnesota that kind of helps set a little bit of context for our conversation today. The main event is to hear from Emily, kind of on the front line, hearing about what her Main Street coordinators are talking about, some of the efforts ongoing in Main Street to support retail businesses in this time. And then we'll finish it up with some question and answer. At Extension, we are putting out a short blog post about the distribution of retail businesses and sales across Minnesota. For ourselves and our work, last 15 years, we've done a lot of work using the state sales tax database in order to do an analysis of communities to figure out kind of the overall strength about a retail marketplace, community by community or county by county. So we're putting out this little blog post just to give a sense of the distribution, both in terms of number of establishments as well as total sales by subcategories of retail businesses. So people have a little bit of a sense about what businesses are being impacted and how they're being impacted. So I think that's kind of a good way of approaching things. As just sort of a couple little factoids. I'm going to give you, instead of a tale of two cities, a tale of two food subcategories, right? The tale of food service in Minnesota and the tale of grocery in Minnesota. One, an essential business, which is very much open and in terms of grocery, and one that's quite impacted in terms of food service. Certainly, it's been in the headlines. Some of the most impacted businesses have been food service businesses, restaurants, very, very much in front of people's minds. Just to give a sense of the magnitude, food service in terms of gross sales, according to the 2017 data from the Department of Revenue, it's about a $10 billion business in the state of Minnesota. They count for 9% of all retail and service sales, the way we define that, but they also account for 17% of the total number of establishments. And I think that's part of the reason why restaurants are kind of at the front of our mind, right? They're a large number of the establishments that we can see in a Main Street a business district. In comparison, grocery accounts for $14 billion of sales. That's 13% of total sales in retail and service, but only 5% of establishments. So again, here's a set of businesses that are very much still working and operating almost as normal, with some caveats during the pandemic, whereas food service have really had to transition in a big way, and a number of them still remain closed. So that's setting up as context. I will put in a link in the chat, this little fact sheet or blog post that we're doing. But the thing that I encourage anybody to do is to go to the Department of Revenue site themselves and download your data, either for your community, if it's available, or maybe for your county, to get a sense about how your distribution of businesses. But now I'd like to bring Emily Casey on, and we're gonna have a little conversation kind of about what things look like out there in retail land. So welcome, Emily. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
I'm really excited to be here.
Great. I get to play, I don't know, talk show host or something here, and you're the special guest. So this is good. Let's just start here. Like, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work supporting Main Street businesses.
Yeah. So I think some people might be out there wondering, what is Rethos? I've never heard this word before. We're not new. We've been around for a long time. Rethos is the new name of the Preservation Alliance of Minnesota. We changed our name last August. The short version is that we weren't an alliance anymore, and we do a lot more than just preservation. So we are Rethos now. So if that was confusing to you, please know that we're not a new surprising thing. And Rethos in our rural programs branch are the coordinating entity for the Main Street program in Minnesota, which is part of the National Main Street Center. So in addition to our work in rural communities, doing downtown assessments and things like that, we manage the Main Street program, which requires a fair amount of legwork and evaluation and tracking for all of the Main Street communities in Minnesota. So in a nutshell, the Main Street program is an economic development tool for historic downtowns. It's very specified in a district. There are very clear boundaries. You know where your downtown is, and those are the areas that we work with, especially with our designated districts. The boundaries are very defined. But Main Street is very much a connector. So we work very, very diligently with our Main Street districts to make sure everyone is at the table. So folks from the city, elected officials and staff, as well as folks from chambers and tourism, CVBs, just general volunteers, large employers, small businesses, retired folks, little kids. Main Street districts are for everyone. And so that is a great perk for us. We're really able to tap into a lot of different populations, but at the same time, we're tapping into a lot of different populations. And every single one of those has been affected by this. And it's a really, I mean, as you all know, completely unprecedented. And we're trying to learn as we go too.
Sure. Well, I think for this webinar, I mean, I think people want to get general sense of that general kind of mood and temperature of, you know, the retailers, the small businesses that you might be hearing from or working with. What are your Main Street coordinators hearing? I mean, what are the main issues you keep hearing about from this group of people?
Sure. So we usually do a once a month check-in call. Here are updates, here's news. We get together in person several times throughout the year. But when this all started to begin around us, we switched to having weekly calls. And I really can truly say each week is a high and the next week is a low. We're very much going up and down the mountainside from week to week. I think some weeks are really positive and people are feeling good and proud of the fact that their downtown retailers, restaurateurs, folks have been able to find new ways to do business or found ways to support each other. I know early on, even seeing some of the restaurants do free lunches for kids in the way they rallied volunteers and funding to make that happen. And then, you know, a week happens where you hear, oh, all of these federal loans are out of money and we didn't get anything because we were too far down the line. It's really just highs and lows I know for at least me, it's almost every day, but some weeks are better than others. And I think we're feeling lucky to be in Minnesota right now. I know that that's one thing we do here is that we see folks looking at neighboring states and the supports that are there or the lack of supports that are there. I think there is one variation I do want to comment to. There's from the beginning been a very definite difference between business owners who also own their building and how they feel about that. There are ways to get, mortgage, just ways to get assistance with mortgages that you can't with rent in the same way. So our business owners who are also renters have I think a deeper fear of what's going on right now than folks who may own their building.
I suppose if you own your building, you might have a longer relationship with a bank. Maybe you're an older business, right? There's that flexibility built in.
Yeah, certainly. And there's a huge variation in people's relationships with their landlords. Some are really positive and active and present and know the reality of what's going on. Other folks have very absentee landlords who maybe don't even live in the state, and trying to stay connected with them is really difficult, that they just see them as an income source themselves. So
sure.
Really interesting split that we're seeing. And I think is going to be I think unfortunately will be a factor in which businesses may end up closing.
Right. Great.
Because I have loved just hearing from our coordinators every single week, but also, I follow them all on social media, and seeing the things they're doing is so cool. So I wrote down my list of here's some of the top things that have happened. One thing I can say was instantly the directors were doing things. There was no waiting and thinking about it. Main Street is very good at being doers and connecting people to make things happen fast. And we saw that within the first day before businesses were even shut down, there were plans in place, which I think was really exciting to see that people were meeting the challenge head on. A few examples that I want to share is that I know some folks have been having the way we have regular check-ins with our directors, they're having business check-in once a week. And they might have a topic, or they'll bring someone in from their bank or the SBA to talk to them, but they're just talking to each other and staying connected because they don't see each other anymore. They can't pop into their neighbor's business, or they don't stop in the coffee shop on their way to work in the morning. So they're just offering them a chance to stay connected with each other. And that has been the number one morale booster, just allowing people to engage and commiserate and share ideas has been so helpful. They've also offered one-on-one calls. So a business doesn't know what they're able to apply for sometimes. It just seems like so much you don't know, and Main Street's really been able to say, hey, you should call this person here, apply at this place, this is the information on things like PPP or unemployment. They're able to be that funnel. There of course are shared advertising, social media promotions, boosting things out to the public of this business is open, this business has curbside pickup, this one will do delivery. Some specific examples. The first one is in Winona, that the Main Street program worked with, which is part of their chamber, worked with a sign printing company and just made generic yard signs that said open for delivery or open for curbside pickup or however capacity that they're open. So if you see that sign, it's okay to go and do business there, order food or whatever, which the signs were totally free to the business owners. The chamber just took care of it, and the printing shop helped offset those costs. There's a business in Owatonna who does promotional packaging, and they have been able to work to do, they're working on gift baskets for folks who are emergency workers and putting together like a thank you basket, which just the show of goodwill is so important right now, just to have folks be reminded that people are thinking of them. Red Wing has done a couple of cool things. They've done a trivia night, which was like Red Wing trivia, and anyone could play, and it was super cute and fun, and lots of people were involved. But there was also like a cruise night, like back in the 50s when people would cruise through downtown and just drive the strip. Like that's coming back. We're seeing like just cool things that you haven't thought about in a long time, or ways to be creative. And people are on board with it. They're eager to do different things.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like that last one. So I grew up in East Grand Forks. Well, I didn't grow up in the 50s. I grew up in the 90s, and we would still cruise Grand Forks. Now that might seem like a trivial thing, but in terms of your examples here, but it's still one of those ways that people are kind of building communities. It's sort of a real human thing. We're building community in a way, even during this time. And it isn't just about like us getting a PPP loan to an individual business. It sounds like there's this stuff going on, but there's also some of these more community building efforts that are going on.
Absolutely.
Right? This makes it. Yeah. It's great. Great. All right. I see there's some chat going on. Ross asked about jobs, and you had the right person answer that question. Chet Bodine popped out the jobs over in the chat if you guys are following that. So this is great. I mean, some of the things you talked about are some of the things that we kind of want to hear about. I mean, part of this idea behind the call is just to hear about initiatives and partnerships that are ongoing or happening, so that other people in economic development can learn from them, if you will.
Yeah,
Is there any other kind of partnerships you want to share?
Yeah, one thing that every community is set up a little bit differently, certainly, but we've seen our main streets be very active, working with their local EDAs or port authorities on some emergency loan funding, helping really get the information from the mouths of the retailers to the ears of the folks who are making those decisions. Sometimes there's a gap, and we've seen before this even opportunities for funding that in theory seemed like a great idea, but in actuality was incredibly difficult for people who are owning, operating, being boots on the ground every day, business owners, to actually enact some of these funding opportunities. So being able to carry that information of this is what we really need right now to the folks who are making funding decisions at that very extreme local level, I think is incredibly beneficial, because it makes for more accessibility and better use of those funds ultimately.
So being in communication with that group, if you will, right? I'm here to kind of talk about what are the real main concerns right here, right now, of this group of people. Yeah, that's that conduit, if you will, of information. That's great. So it sounds like your Main Street coordinators are out doing a lot of things. It sounds like there's some things that have worked quite well, right? I know those of us in economic development, there's things that we try that go really great. And there might be some things that you want to highlight. They're like across the communities, these things seem to be going well and working well. But also at the same time, there's a lot of things that we do in economic development that we try and honestly don't go that well. And so are there any examples you might have of things that seem to be working just right, or things you want to iterate that are that you've already talked about that certainly seem to be working right across communities, or maybe some things that have been tried that are just total duds and doesn't seem like it's going anywhere?
So one thing that I think has been the most important that I'm hearing over and over is that giving opportunities to talk amongst themselves, the retail business owners, is so important. I think early on, we had a lot of the Main Street director trying to do stopping into the places that were open, trying to call everybody at least once a week or more. And that proved exhausting for them. And we're also seeing, and I'm going to guess many of you are too, that people are survey weary. And although the data is really, really important to us, business owners see another survey and they feel like, I've taken 4 of these, what's one more going to do? I know, especially through the National Main Street Center, we're really trying to get a good longitudinal line of information. So all of our Main Street communities track specific data sets every single quarter, things like business opening and closings, number of employees, public money invested, building sales, etc. So we have some good data from the get-go, but asking very direct questions to business owners has been really helpful. But we're starting to see a drop-off in responses to surveys because people are just tired of answering question after question. And it does kind of stink to think about all the time when it is so all encompassing. Sometimes you're just weary of answering. We are encouraging folks to keep trying it. I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing. That's people are just tired of trying to navigate things, and how do you keep pushing forward, and people just need a minute to take a breath.
Right. Very good. Well, let's go back to this question and the questions here on the right, see what's coming in. I'm gonna deal with one right now. Somebody asked about where to find the statistics by community from the Department of Revenue. I just put that link in there. So that one's sort of more on my plate than yours, Emily. We did have this question about jobs. Chip Odine answered that. So this is your time now in the chat. Ask questions, okay, people. Oh, Ronnie already answered the other one. So let's see, Colleen Tollefson, looking ahead, how many businesses have websites that can take orders and payments to allow for curbside pickup and delivery? Any sense of that? Or?
A little, yes, sort of. So even community to community, I'm always curious about this because some communities are heavy Facebook users, right? Like they're able to say, you know what, I don't have a website, I'm just going to use Facebook, it'll work. But even now we're seeing folks that are doing that and they're not reaching everybody because there are people who don't know in the community, hey, you don't have a Facebook account, you're not going to see this information on the business. So we actually just at Rethos had a fund available for our designated communities. It's usually allocated towards things like contractors for learning workshops or fluffy things like new cool lights and benches. I mean, it's not fluffy stuff. It's important, but it feels fluffy right now. That we were able to switch those funds to be direct funds to business owners. And I would say over half of the business applicants, we had the application open for 7 days. We had 112 applicants. Over half of them were to either create a website or to create online commerce on their website. We are hearing a couple restaurants in Wilmer actually mentioned that they were doing orders over the phone, and their kitchen was open. We're doing pickups, but people were calling back over the course of 4 hours because they had one phone line and that phone line was constantly busy. So they couldn't actually take the number of orders that they could handle in the kitchen because their technology couldn't handle the influx on a single phone line. So they were getting like Facebook Messenger, people texting people who worked in the kitchen. And that I think is something that people are starting to act really fast on, and luckily you can act really fast. You can get an online ordering system up awfully quickly. I want to say that there is a gap too in it's age. Business owners who are in those like last 10 years closer to retirement are a little less eager to make some of those changes because they're really thinking hard about, am I going to try to weather this or am I just going to call it? Right. Some of those younger businesses, not necessarily younger business owners, but just businesses under 10 years old are able to jump on board with these changes a little bit. We've seen businesses say, I'll get your orders ready and I'll do curbside pickup for places like flower shops or even clothing stores. Are doing like virtual shopping experiences. But the restaurant business has been the quickest, I think, to figure out ways, maybe not, you can post a PDF of a menu and post an online submit form for orders pretty easily. So I think that's why the restaurant world has been able to make that happen faster.
Sure. And I know as a counterpoint, I'm fairly involved in some grocery work, both in extension, and I'm involved in managing a food co-op in Detroit Lakes. And so, as a point of comparison, I mean, a restaurant versus, say, a grocery store that might have 60,000 SKUs, trying to do an online ordering system is kind of hard.
Right.
It's a tougher lift than, hey, I have a menu. Here I have 6 specials today, right? And that's so there certainly are those challenges. There's a question related to, do you have any sense of any kind of training related to curbside doing online ordering that has been helpful, or are people just been working with local web people who put in for those requests for funds?
That's one thing we have seen. Almost every community has like 1 or 2 app developers or website people. We have seen a good uptick in folks reaching out to them. I also have a hunch that places like Squarespace and Wix are skyrocketing right now because, I mean, they do make, if you are able to be a little bit web savvy, you can create those websites. And so I have a hunch, I don't know for sure, but I have a hunch that that's what most folks are doing.
Yeah, very good. And also I have a draft of use of small business, use of Shopify. That'll be coming out through extension.
I've heard a lot of
so there's another thing. Very easy to do. Let me just keep on rolling here. Let's see, I work for St. Louis County, and we're receiving some HUD funding to respond to COVID-19. We want to collect data responses on needs from community agencies, nonprofit agencies, business and residents. Should we go about collecting this information differently since folks are survey weary? Any thoughts? Question?
I think if there is any way, I think countywide is different because you're dealing with multiple communities, but we have seen some places where they've been able to get their chamber folks and the Main Street folks together so that they can send one single survey instead of 2 or 3 different surveys in a week. So knowing that there will be a number of questions that will overlap, finding ways to share that resource or finding a couple places who are going to be sending something that you could maybe tag onto or have some of that data that you already need is really helpful. And then you're creating a really good ally for the future too. If you can share, that is, I think, the most helpful right now.
Very good.
I saw a question. Somebody posted
go ahead.
times about promotions for local residents to spend money. I've seen a ton of Facebook campaigns and e-blasts. One thing that we're hearing concern about, and rightly so, is there was a big push right at the beginning for folks to buy gift cards, which is great. It's an instant cash flow. But the concern is that what happens when July rolls around and every single dollar that store takes is a gift card. They're not getting any new cash influx. And so I think those are some concerns that businesses have right now. I'm also seeing other businesses just kind of play it by ear. Like, okay, if we can open up slowly, we're going to take shopping appointments. And we'll allow 4 people in the store at a time and new counter checkout requirements or doing virtual shopping experiences with like somebody, one of a business owner in like a clothing store had the idea of like, I'll just wear a GoPro on my head and walk around the store for people, which I thought was hilarious, but could work. And so I think those are the efforts that are on pause a little bit right now. I think they were very earnest at first with like gift card buying and that sort of thing. Restaurants have been able to ride this a little easier. It's those retail gift shops, that kind of thing, that are hair salons too, but I think that will come about sooner than others. So yeah, that one I think will be interesting, and folks are just kind of waiting. They're waiting to see.
Great. Maybe one last question, John or Michael, or we got to wrap this thing up?
Well, I think that it is 9:30, and so we do want to keep our promise to people that we are going to just keep these limited to a half an hour. So I think that, Ryan, if it's okay with you, maybe we're officially, we're going to call this the end. But if people want to hang around and ask some more questions of you and Emily, Emily, if you're willing to do that, we sure would appreciate it. And for those of you that do have to sign off right now, thanks very much for joining us. And we will have we'll be having more webinars coming down the pike here. So we'll be sending emails out about that, and stay tuned.
Yeah, and John, just breaking in here, there's an eval. We need people's comments. Like Kathy had asked me the other day, can we do a webinar on reaching out to people of color and underserved populations? So we need comments like that, but there's an evaluation link in the chat, and also the link for where to find future webinars. We don't have any posted at the moment, but we'll almost certainly be coming up with something in the next week or two. So thanks for giving us that information.
Very good. Well,
Ryan,
thanks everybody.
back to you.
We will hang around. We'll answer some of these questions that are still in the chat, and keep asking things. We'll keep talking.
I do want to note Sarah Swedberg, who's the Assistant City Planner and Main Street Director in Wilmer, commented on something that I totally forgot about, which is a great example. So thank you, Sarah. So the Milk District in Orlando created a pretty cool, I don't want to call it an incentive program, but shopping program where businesses are kind of banding together and creating a coupon situation where if you buy a coupon for, I just pulled it up just a second. So you buy a coupon for $7.50 and it can be redeemed for $10 at participating businesses. So you're essentially getting like a good gift card perk discount thing. But that's going to help that money be spread around the community a little bit more. People from all over the country, I think, are buying these, which is kind of cool that people are focusing on districts. They're shipping them. They're not sending them virtually. They're sending like actual hard gift cards. So it's cool to see that cooperative working. I think that I've seen a couple chambers, one here in Minnesota, but actually one in Iowa, doing some really cool things. I used to live in Decorah and worked there, and their chamber did something where they created a gift card hub where you could go to the chamber website, you could buy a gift card for any downtown member business, and it would go directly to that business. So rather than the businesses having to coordinate it themselves, that was a pretty efficient way for folks to help support.
Yeah, right up your guys' wheelhouse in terms of it's about coordinating Main Street, right? So why can't we coordinate some kind of gift card effort or direct purchases for throughout the district effort, right?
I think one thing we're going to see, we haven't yet. I think we're going to see the summer requiring some really creative options. And for this, I would encourage you to consider talking to artists and creative folks in your community who have incredible ideas, who often aren't tapped for this kind of work. You usually throw things to city planners or chamber people or tourism people, but talk to folks in your community who you normally don't. We're already seeing things like town celebrations and county fairs and graduations. All of these things are getting canceled. And while that is really critical for your small businesses, that is a big shopping push for them, and restaurants, especially even things like Mother's Day. We also see that it's going to affect these downtown communities from tourism dollar standpoint, because if your hotels are empty, you're getting no hotel motel tax money into your community, which means that I think in most communities your CVBs aren't getting funding, which means that all of the promotions that they do aren't going to happen. So it's stuff that just hasn't quite hit yet, that is going to continue through the summer, that it's going to be devastating first. It's already devastating. But finding folks in your community who might have some different ways to try new options is going to be so important.
Yeah, so it's like, how do we also creatively rethink an individual retail business, how that's going to work, or a district, or some kind of community celebrations and how those are going to work. The idea of just saying, I know how it is. I mean, hey, we've done this thing, we want to improve it a little bit, let's fix the marketing. Whereas you might be in a place where you're like, well, let's just rethink the whole darn thing.
Yeah.
In which case, an artist might be better than your usual putting your marketing hat on with your chamber director hat on.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And not to say that isn't important. I mean, obviously that's a big part of what makes communities work, but that's your point. Like, you might have to creatively rethink an entire business or something.
I think this is one time where, so full disclosure, I was a theater major in college, and
there we go.
I use that major every single day. And this is one of those times where go to your humanities people, those people who studied philosophy, or those people who studied art, or those people who studied theater or music, because right now people are the focus of what's going on. And that is what I think is so great about Main Street, is they know that it's the people that are important in the district, right? And so by connecting with those people in ways that you haven't before, that's how we're going to be able to weather all of this pandemic and the aftermath.
Well, that's great. From one theater major to a classics major. I'm
Great.
Greek and Latin I'm not using on a daily basis here in my extension work, but yeah, I'm very much a person of the humanities. So it's about critical thinking and
I was so curious. So I'm guessing many of you were at the Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities conference this past year. And I was so curious to just ask around the room and say, how many of you were like some sort of humanities major? Because I keep seeing people who study philosophy or history or whatever coming into these fields where we're working with people in our communities. And I think that these programs are better for it. So thank you all for your work. I think you're doing really good. Good.
Probably that's kind of that bridging across disciplines, if you will. So is anybody still with us now? Now we're just having an interesting look at all these people that are still with us. This is great. Emily and I are now just getting into conversation. Other questions, put something in the chat, please. Give us a hard question. We're still hanging around here. We're happy to talk any little piece of retail you'd like to talk about.
Love to hear if there's, information that you've heard from your Main Street or your downtown businesses that is just a comment that you think would be really helpful for us at Rethos to hear. We would love to know more about it. I do want to give a plug out. I'll find the link and get it in here. There is a survey that the National Main Street Center did just about it started right at the beginning with some really good data on small businesses and what they're needing, what their expectations might be. So I will throw that into the chat box here really quickly, but that set of data is going to be continually monitored. They're going to reach out to those initial respondents throughout this entire process to see how their thoughts have changed.
You seen the chat there, Emily?
Yeah, I have to copy the link. I'm a little slow.
Oh. Does anyone have a sense how long business should anticipate providing online options, or how long the recovery might take for Main Street businesses? Some businesses are reluctant to ramp up online for a short time. Absolutely. Kind of remains to be seen, at least my own take. I'd love to hear what you think, Emily, is that, general senses overall, there has been a migration to like mixing bricks and mortar and online sales. I mean, it's something that we've seen, especially depending on your sub-industry across kind of mix of types of retail businesses. I often see this in terms of clothing, at least in rural Minnesota. We've seen a little bit of an uptake in terms of like clothing boutique types. And what I often see them doing, I think this is primarily driven by the internet, which has allowed these small accounts in order to buy small amounts of inventory on a main street, if you will. But they have a brick and mortar store. What I often see them doing is combining that with sort of an online Facebook store or shop that's integrating with the Facebook. and doing these online sales together with bricks and mortar. So it kind of remains to be seen, but it seems as if this has been a long time trend in terms of how these two things combine, and this might actually catalyze some businesses in order to begin that mixing, if you will, so that they have multiple revenue streams or market channels, if you will. But
right. I think that we were seeing the beginnings of it before, and now it's here to stay. I think I saw somebody ask about like curbside delivery or curbside pickup and delivery happening forever. I think that expectation exists now. And I think that going forward, that's what people will expect. They're going to want this to continue because we're looking at potentially years of on and off needing to be careful with isolation. One thing that I know we've also been talking about at the Main Street level is in terms of reopening, there will not be grand reopenings the way we've pictured them in the past with, fun social event mixer things. It won't happen or it would be ill-advised, I think, to do so. So those grand openings will not be what you know them to be from the past. And what they look like is really hard to tell. I think, if you have a business owner who maybe is in a compromised immune system world, like they might be a lot more hesitant to open up in a big way to stores who don't have that same fear. So I think we're still at that. We don't know what we don't know yet. We don't know, reopening in November is different than a reopening in October or August. Like, it's hard to tell.
that's great. Well, hey, look, see, I called for some questions and we're starting to get some comments and questions here. So to our point about online sales, Gabby made the point about the floral shop in the town of 1300. That
I love
sounds
that.
like it's going great guns.
Good
right?
idea.
So that's great to hear. Great to see. Susan, I'm not from Minnesota, but I think need to think of ramping up online as a long-term strategy for survival. Kind of that point we're talking about. If you haven't been doing it before, you might be getting online now. The need for an increased online presence was outlined in the Main Street report. That's referring back to a report of yours, Emily, or?
I think so. That's what
Okay.
I was assuming. Yeah. I did send that link that you can copy and paste into your browser.
Okay. So Mike asked, if you're thinking about starting a local education program that encourages businesses to embrace online. My expectation is that even if stay-at-home orders change, you'll see a lot of consumers reluctant to venture out. True enough. So, I mean, based on our conversation, I think in terms of starting a local online educational program, you're probably already doing this, Mike. It certainly sounds like working with some of our local people that do web work. It's an obvious place to start to say, how would you like to do a program like this? I know for ourselves in Extension, we've done a fair amount of work around e-marketing. We had a very long initiative with that. And I know certainly one thing that's from our initiatives and communities that we found most useful are these peer-to-peer initiatives, educational initiatives. And so, my own advice is to think about how that gets built in an online environment. A lot of communities have done sort of like social media breakfast kind of things, and they've built community around hearing from their peers on terms of how they're using social media or how they're getting an online presence. And so certainly you're probably already thinking about that, Mike, but how can individual businesses showcase what's working for them and what's not working for them, and trying to troubleshoot together what those issues are, whether you're using a WordPress site or Shopify or whatever you're using. But thoughts, Emily?
I would also jump on what you just said, Ryan, and say, like, none of us are experts about right now. None of us have done this before, and we're learning too. So if you have like an idea to work with the businesses in your community, great, go for it. I think that we're going to see a lot more of somebody had an idea and they tried it and it worked. And nobody knows. And that's kind of beautiful, but also really weird right now.
As the theater major, you'd say this is a time for improv.
I mean, I don't love improv myself, but I get it.
Okay. All right. Very
Yeah.
good. Let's keep rolling here. We still got questions. So,
Ryan, I think
Keith,
maybe
yeah.
let's do one more question and
Okay.
then wrap up. But I'm
We'll
gonna
let you wrap it up. Okay.
make a
Emily and I-
suggestion that I think I think there's plenty of interest here, and we certainly could do another retail or another webinar on retail here. It seems like that might be a good idea. So I'd say
Yeah.
take another question, but we'll wrap it up here just to respect.
Great. Well, we have this last one from Keith. Okay, so this is a PPP loan question. Not received additional info. Is there anything more than wait and see? This may not be an appropriate question. Yeah, I've dealt with that personally myself, Keith, and I think it is kind of a wait and see. I don't think Emily and I are ones with any kind of great insight on it. I think the person that would probably have the greatest insight, if anybody, is your local banker who you're probably already working with. The people in the finance industry are the ones that are really at that forefront of like, where do these SBA loans, where do they currently stand, that kind of stuff. So that's probably not necessarily, I know a lot of people are in the wait and see situation, if you will, with those loans and grants. And so that's not really the greatest answer, but I really just think that's where it's at. Unless somebody else on here is a bit of a finance person and has any other greater insight, if you want to put that in the chat. Great. And Mary put in a little follow-up with Mike Wimmer's comment. Very good. Thank you. Yep. And Christine chimes in here about the applications. Just get the application in. And you did. There you go. All right. Well, thanks, Emily. Thanks, Michael and John, for hosting us. Thanks to everybody who joined us. And stay tuned for what next topic will be. Or do that eval and give us a topic, and then we'll do it. How's
Thanks,
that sound?
Ryan.
There we go. Yeah, thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Emily. Emily left her contact information in the chat here. You can also reach us at the Center for Community Vitality at extension.umn.edu/community. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing everybody the next time.
Great. Take care.
Thank you very much.